I'm Bruce Karasik, co-founder of the Jewish Republican Alliance. We're so happy to have Will Witt here with us today from Prager University. We'll be speaking with Will in just a few minutes, but first, last night a good friend spoke to me on the phone, and he's a conservative and a Trump supporter, and he asked me a question. He says, I'm not very politically involved, but can you please educate me on how Joe Biden's presidency has negatively affected our country over the last very short time, less than a year. So here's part of what will be an ongoing dialogue on the Biden administration. This morning, we woke up to the news that inflation has surged to 6.8%, a 39-year high. The price of almost everything has soared and is in short supply. This is the highest inflation since 1982. Gasoline prices in California are almost $5 a gallon, and in many places over $5 a gallon. We have gone from the amazing achievement during the Trump administration of achieving energy independence to now Joe Biden canceling the Keystone Pipeline and others, begging Saudi Arabia to increase more oil production, approving a Russian pipeline and stopping ours in the name of climate change, depleting our strategic oil reserves instead of creating a business-friendly climate to produce more energy. Every issue now is framed on a racial component. If you listen to the divisive language from Joe Biden and the Democrats, they consistently are alleging white supremacy, white racism, white privilege, and looking at everything in the frame of race. And now they're forcing critical race theory to be taught in the schools and threatening parents from the Justice Department. It's now threatening parents if they dare to speak out. My only question is, if white racism is so widespread in America and so prevalent in our society, why do people like Jussie Smollett have to fabricate situations, lie, and concoct all kinds of, and orchestrate all kinds of fake racial events? If racism is so widespread in America, wouldn't there be real life examples that Jussie Smollett could have used instead of making one up? And of course, the left-wing media and the Democrats went along for the ride, jumping to conclusions, including Joe Biden, who spoke out about the Smollett incident from the very beginning without waiting for the facts. And he says, we must stand up and demand that we no longer give this safe harbor, that homophobia and racism have no place in our streets. We're with you, Jussie. And Kamala Harris said, this was an attempted modern day lynching. Now, wouldn't it have been more responsible to get the facts before speaking out? Of course it would. On COVID, Joe Biden is now failing on COVID, with more people dying in 2021 than died in 2020. Exactly 420,550 people to date have died in 2021, and not only, but 361,430 people died in 2020. But what Joe Biden said was very interesting. During the Trump presidency, Joe Biden said, if you hear nothing else I say to you tonight, hear this. Anyone who is responsible for that many deaths should not remain as president of the United States. So under your rules, President Joe Biden, you should resign immediately. Crime in most big cities now has risen to intolerable levels. Now, KBC just reported that an LAPD detective, Jamie McBride, who is president of the police union and the LA Police Protective League, is claiming that Los Angeles is now not safe for visitors. McBride said, don't visit, because we don't think we can keep you safe right now. He said it's almost safer to hang out with Alec Baldwin on a movie set than go shopping in Los Angeles right now. Our border is not being protected as people pour in without being checked or screened for COVID or past crimes, secretly flown to all areas of our country. So Joe Biden has now refused to protect our border, but now threatens Russia with American troops being sent to Ukraine and use nuclear weapons to protect Ukraine's border. So I don't understand that at all. He has botched the withdrawal from Afghanistan on foreign policy and was very, I think this was really terrible. With all the achievements that President Trump did with the Abraham Accords, President Biden is now refusing to continue that. So in summary, Joe Biden is wrong on the economy, divisive and wrong on race relations, poorly handling COVID, presiding over high crime and refusing to keep Americans safe in their own cities, and terrible on foreign policy. High crime, runaway inflation, shortages of goods, empty shelves, hundreds of ships backed up in our harbors, open borders, continued censorship of conservatives, and instigating racial unrest and division. Now, I can go on, and I will, but there'll have to be a part two. So much more to say. But I want to thank you all for being here. And I would like to introduce you now, someone who always had a lot of great things to say to you, my good friend, fellow JRA co-founder, Mitch Silberman. Mitch.
Hello, JRA community. It is always so wonderful when we are together. You know, one of the best-selling business books in history was titled How to Win Friends and Influence People, released in 1936 by Dale Carnegie. So when I saw the title of Will's book, I said, Bruce, we have got to get Will on this show. His book is titled How to Win Friends and Influence Enemies. Now, I want you to think of what a profound title that is, at least to me. So throughout most of America's history, we've had two dominant parties. And I always felt like, well, the Democrats are our opponents. Well, not when I was a Democrat. Like you, like me, you may have been a Democrat, but I felt, listen, both parties want the same thing for America. They both love America. They embrace the Constitution. They promote liberty. They know capitalism is the best system ever designed to unleash human ingenuity and bring people out of poverty. But we just have different approaches. We have different ways to go about it. Well, if the last 11 months haven't shown that to be wrong, nothing will. And I'm here to say that, sadly, the Democratic Party is no longer our opponent. They are our enemy. And as Mark Levin would say, that's right, I said it. Now, why would I make such a bold statement like that? So let me ask you, if you had an entity or an organization or a major party that did the following things, what would you call them? What would you call a party that teaches young children to hate their own country, to feel guilty because their race is due to the pigmentation of their skin? What would you call a party that proclaims defund the police and sits idly by while cities are burned to the ground and businesses are destroyed and people are attacked? And if they do catch some of the criminals, they have little to no bail. What would you call a party that is literally printing trillions of dollars, causing rampant inflation, harming the lower and middle class the most, and burdening our children and grandchildren with unfathomable debt? What would you call a party that just like this abruptly ends our energy independence, leading us to grovel to countries that hate us to please sell us gas? And what would you call a party that sends billions of dollars to the world's largest sponsor of terrorism? I would call that party an enemy. In fact, if your goal was to destroy America, please tell me what you would do any differently than what today's Democratic Party is doing right now. So what do you do with an enemy? Well, you must defeat them. Now, I'm not talking about violence. We all know most violence comes from the left. We defeat them with our words, our actions, our deeds, our passion, our commitment, our ingenuity, our fierce passion to defend and protect Judeo-Christian values upon which our beloved country was founded. You know, I do a lot of reading, like I'm sure you do as well, and I came across this quote. It might be a little hyperbolic, but listen, if 3 years ago I told you things that would be happening in 2021, I don't think anyone would have believed it. So here's a quote I came across. It didn't start with gas chambers. It started with one party controlling the media, one party controlling the message, one party deciding what is the truth, one party censoring speech and calling on supporters to harass. It started when good people turned a blind eye and let it happen. Well, we are good people. We are not going to let it happen. So how do you win friends How do you win friends and influence enemies? Well, I'm glad you asked. We have the author of that book right now, and it's my honor to introduce Will Witt. He is a Colorado native, attended the University of Colorado Boulder for 2 years before he dropped out, a decision I'm sure he gleefully made based on the relentless indoctrination at virtually all universities in America that they push today. Before working for PragerU, he worked with other nonprofits to help spread the values of freedom and conservatism across America. Will Witt now creates online content for PragerU and helps inspire many young people worldwide to fight for the values they believe in. Will, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on. And Bruce, I mean, you said it's only been 11 months and you're given that, that rundown of what's happened. It's laughable. It's hard to believe it's only been 11 months.
Yeah, it seems like a prison sentence of 11 years.
Yeah, I know, man.
Well, Will, welcome. It's so great to have you on. We're so happy to have you here. I've got a question for you. You know, you're a young conservative leader, and most people your age are probably on the left of people that surround you. So what are some of your major influences? What has influenced you, whether it's a person, a book, or anything that helped you form your current viewpoints right now?
As I wish more people asked me this question or asked other people this question. I think it's very important. Right now, my people are obviously Dennis Prager, who is my wisdom guru, the guy who teaches me almost everything. But I'm actually rereading Andrew Breitbart's book right now, Righteous Indignation. And this book, if you guys have not read it, is absolutely incredible. And a man ahead of his time when it came to how to respond to people in the internet age, and someone who has been a huge inspiration for a lot of the work that I do. And then I also read a lot of Friedrich Nietzsche. If you guys are familiar with Nietzsche, he is someone who, in terms of being an individual and fighting against a corrupt system, he is someone who has been a huge inspiration for me. So those are some of the people that I really look up to. There's a lot more, like my mom as well. But, you know, in terms of a political world, I have to influence my mom on politics, but she influences me on everything else.
That's terrific. Will, I'm just curious, were you always a conservative, or was there a turning point in your life?
Yeah, I was definitely not always a conservative. I was actually a liberal atheist growing up my entire life, all the time that I was back in Colorado. And I wasn't just an atheist. I mean, I would go up to people and tell them how stupid God was, how dumb the Bible was, right? That was the type of person that I was. And it wasn't until I went to college at CU Boulder, like you talked about, which we called the People's Republic of Boulder, that I was actually able to change my mind, right? Because even though I thought I was on the left, the level of intolerance that so many of the people there had for any sort of difference of opinion was enough for me, as someone who grew up with at least I think a semblance of common sense, to realize this is wrong. The things that these people are pushing are wrong. I mean, I was an English major and I was in a sociology class, which was a useless class. And they're talking about white privilege and how terrible capitalism is and how terrible America is. And it was so odd for me to hear those kinds of things. You know, when I was going through high school and middle school in Colorado, I was the minority. There were lots of Black and Hispanic kids at the schools that I went to, and I was the minority. To think that I was oppressing these other people because of the color of my skin was absolutely wild to me. And so after that, and also dating a girl in 2016 who voted for Hillary Clinton, I can tell you guys gladly we are no longer together at this point. But after a few of those, I started to get very involved and started doing a lot of research on my own. Eventually, I found out about PragerU and decided to make a video for them and taught myself how to edit the video, shoot the video. It was me going around on my campus asking women about the wage gap. And I sent the video to PragerU and they ended up loving the video, posting it, and then offering me a job. And so after 2 years of college, dropped out of school, moved to Los Angeles to come and work for PragerU. So, and that was about 4 years ago.
Impressive.
That is such a great story about taking the initiative and doing what you wanted to do and showing PragerU. That's a fabulous story. I didn't know that.
Thank you.
You know, in your new book, How to Win Friends and Influence Enemies, Taking on Liberal Arguments with Logic and Humor, can you give us some examples, you know, from your book on how humor and logic work to take on liberals, something that's happened in your past that you use that?
You know, I was very intentional with what I made that byline of the book, with logic and humor. I think that a lot of people will say, oh, well, we need to be these always serious Republicans, and we gotta, you know, just show them the tax code. And if we do that, then people's minds are going to be changed. But I can tell you that while Republicans in the 80s and 90s were focused on that, the left was getting involved in Hollywood. They were getting involved at the universities. They were getting involved in comedy. I mean, this is why all the late night TV shows are dominated by the left, why all the comedy shows are dominated by the left. And this is why they're winning in so many arenas, because we were sleeping. While they were following Alinsky's rules for radicals, we were busy trying to still win people over on just a purely old school factual basis. Now, I'm not saying to abandon facts, obviously, but what you have to do is take the facts that you have and the right information and use them in many ways a humorous way. You don't have to always do that, but humor is a way to unite people. Okay, if you can get people who are laughing together, you know that you can change someone's mind, or at least open them up to a different viewpoint. And so people know, this is why the left, you know, when conservatives want to make jokes or we want to do funny things like that, they say, oh, that's anti-PC. You know, you can't say that. You can't make jokes about this. Because once you start poking fun at the things that the left does and you start making jokes about it, that's when you can change people's minds. And they don't want people to laugh. They want people to live miserable lives in this Marxist new dystopia that they are creating. So remember that when you are talking to people, that it is so important to try your best. Not everyone is so funny, okay? I'm really not that funny. I just get some good moments on film and it works out. But it really is something incredible when you can get someone laughing. And then the logic portion, if you look at the left's arguments, I mean, logic is not something that is in their vocabulary, okay? It is illogical, most of the things that they're doing. The things that Joe Biden and this administration are doing are completely illogical. I think that that's pretty clear to a lot of people. And so finding common ground with them is very hard if you can't get to them on an actual logic basis. Like imagine someone says, you know, free healthcare is a right. Free healthcare is a right. They'll just come out and say that. All you have to do in that situation as a logical person is say, why? Right? You don't have to go and get all these really crazy facts and things about free healthcare to present to them at that exact moment. All you have to do to start off these conversations is say, why? And once you can do that and you can actually incorporate the facts that you want to talk about into your questions, then you can have the logic and then you get better and you can do the humor. All of those two things work together in unison to be able to change people's minds.
You know, Will, your observation is so true because all of us, I don't care how logical we are, all of us make decisions with emotion and justify with logic. It's just how we're wired.
Yeah.
So obviously you have a phenomenal reputation for going around on campuses and talking to young people. What are some of the most shocking interactions you've had when you've been walking around on video?
Man, we've had some great ones, let me tell you.
Such as?
Yeah, one thing I'll say at first, that when I'm making my videos, I understand that we see a lot of people who we just call like stupid leftists when I'm talking to them on my videos, but the pinnacle purpose of my videos has always been to change minds, okay? And expose what the left has done at these universities or in these cities that I go to. And so it's not me trying to go out and make red meat content that only conservatives are going to watch. I'm making the content hoping that people on the left will watch it and understand that these are the arguments we are making against the things that they bring up. And so some of the craziest ones, I mean, I had a guy who told me that he was getting a vasectomy for climate change because he didn't want to have children, because because of the children that he would bring into this world would destroy the earth from a climate standpoint. And that was logical. A wild one. No, yeah. You know, maybe a rare moment of logic from some of these people, you know, it happens every once in a while. When I dressed up as a Native American and went and asked people about what they're thankful for Thanksgiving, I got attacked and my costume was ripped off. And after that, I actually went to the Navajo Indian reservation to ask them about it. And they ended up loving all the stuff I was doing. And they didn't think it was cultural appropriation at all. They didn't want these college students offended on their behalf. And then one of the most egregious is when I went to Cal State LA and I had this guy come up to me and say, "Why are you here? You are threatening the students." I was like, "No, I'm just asking questions." And he ended up calling the police on me for being on his campus. And the police come and they basically just absolutely shut this kid down. He's saying that I'm terrorizing the students, I'm threatening them with my ideas, and the police say, no, this is freedom of speech. He can be here, he can ask questions. And so those are kind of the the levels of some of the people that I get to talk to. You know, there is a point when you are talking to people where it is, I am trying to change this person's mind. And then there are some people like that kid who it is not necessarily my job to try and change this person's mind. My job is in that moment is to vanquish evil. Okay, there is evil out there that needs to be stopped. There are people who want to push evil onto this world or their own selfish dogma that they are trying to push, and those type of people have to be stopped. You know, I feel for the people who are just normal people who are on the left who don't really know what's going on. And that is a different type of person than the people who are genuinely out there trying to commit evil acts.
Yeah, that's so true, Will. It's amazing how free speech is not permitted in so many circles. One of the things that you wanted to talk about today was this issue of COVID that doesn't seem to want to go away or leave us. It may never leave us, but I talked a little bit about it in my opening remarks, and I really don't believe that the Biden administration has handled it really well. The results certainly show that. Even with the vaccine, more people are dying. And what has troubled me more than anything else is you have these people on ventilators in the hospital, and they want to try things like ivermectin or something, and the hospitals fight them in the courts to prevent them from even having the right to try things. So what are your thoughts on what's going on, where we're going with this whole thing, and what should be done?
Wow, we could really be here all day on that type of open-ended question. Let me tell you about ivermectin, first of all. I mean, ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine were both two medications that were cheap and easy to use, okay? And they were in many different clinical trials have been shown to help COVID. In Peru, okay? Peru now has the highest death rate out of any country for COVID. When Peru instituted ivermectin into their country, they saw their COVID deaths drop by 14 times. Okay, not 14%, 14 times, okay? Then the World Health Organization comes in and Dr. Fauci and they say, no more ivermectin, okay? This is horse dewormer, this is for animals. And so they pressure the president of Peru to stop using ivermectin, to restrict the access of ivermectin. And once they did that, what happened? Deaths in Peru rose by 13 times. These are not coincidences, okay? These types of measures that Dr. Fauci, the World Health Organization have taken to what they say protect people, when in reality, all you have done is limit access to treatments that have been proven to work in multiple cases, multiple trials, multiple countries. It has been proven to work in Afghanistan, again in Peru, in India. It's been proven to work, especially ivermectin in India, which they were giving out to people. In Africa, it has totally been proven to work. In South Africa, they were having very limited amount of COVID cases. They had such a limited amount of COVID cases that they literally sent their vaccines back. They didn't need the vaccines because if you know anything about Africa, I mean, they basically take hydroxychloroquine as a pill that everyone takes weekly. You know, it's like it's something that you take for a lot of diseases and things that are within the continent of Africa. And so they sent their vaccines back. But the thing about all this is that the ivermectin and the HCQ doesn't make Big Pharma a lot of money. It doesn't make Pfizer a lot of money. It doesn't make Moderna a lot of money. And so what they do, they demonize these cheap and effective medicines so that they can roll out these vaccines. Whether the vaccines, whether you want to get vaccinated or not, that is your prerogative. But to say that Big Pharma is some altruistic entity that is pushing these out for your best interests, or as someone who is, or as a group that is really trying to help you, it seems to me like that doesn't make much sense. I mean, I look back at the opiate epidemic, right? And Purdue Pharma came out in multiple places on their videos and with their staff and all these different people and their consultants, and they said opiates aren't even addictive. Only 1% of the people who take opiates actually get addicted to them. It's not the drug's fault, it's the person's fault who's taken them, right? That is what Purdue Pharma said. While millions of lives were being destroyed, families' lives, the people who died from the drug throughout the 90s and 2000s when this was happening, and they continued to parrot the exact same thing. All right. And then doctors and concerned parents who their kids might have died, they came out in droves and said, you need to do something about this. And Purdue Pharma just kept saying, no, we don't need to do anything about this. And then what happened? They called those people crazy. They said the parents and these doctors are crazy. They're nut jobs for coming out and saying anything against this. And then what happened? Everything that those parents and nut job doctors came out and said turned out to be true. And Purdue Pharma got sued. Purdue Pharma got sued for a lot of money for the things that they said. So the fact that so many on the left are coming out and just, for some reason, instinctively trusting these big pharmaceutical companies, to me just seems very odd. It seems very odd that this is what they have chosen to do, but it's because you've turned people into, instead of a individualist society that America was founded on, you have turned them into a Marxist collective society where people feel more safe in a group. People would rather feel like they are justified by being in a group of people than right and brave and passionate as an individual. And that's why this has expanded into the behemoth, the Leviathan that it is today.
Can you imagine what kind of person would actually go to court to prevent someone on a ventilator from trying something? Like, if there's
it's evil.
It's evil.
So, Will, we all love success stories. I've had a few in my life where I've brought people over from the dark side. Can you share a few examples of when you've influenced enemies successfully?
Yeah, definitely. I had so this was actually funny. On my book tour, I was speaking at Cal State Fullerton, and I went there, I did my talk, and then I would do a book signing after all my events. And this kid comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, do you remember me?" I'm like, "No, sorry, I don't remember you. Have we met before?" He's like, "About 3 or 4 years ago, you did a video on Hollywood Boulevard where you asked people to name the vice president. Who was the vice president? And you asked me that question, and I couldn't even tell you who the vice president was." And I was like, "Wow, that's..." Yeah, I didn't really recognize him that much, but I was like, "Wow, I did do that video. Why are you here now?" Right? And he's like, "Well, because after that video, I saw it online and I was like, I was embarrassed with myself. And so now I went and did a ton of different research and looked up things and started watching your videos. And now I am this conservative guy who's going and influencing all of my friends about the things that you taught me through your videos." I mean, it is such an incredible thing, like when those types of things happen, when people understand that these values, these things that we are teaching are not some crazy right-wing extremist conspiracy theory that the left will make it out to be. I mean, these are the values that founded our country. These are the biblical values that make people good. Like Dennis Prager talks about, that people are not inherently good when they are born. They need to be taught a lot of these values. Freedom is a taught value. And so it's so cool to see that people are watching my videos and PragerU videos and reading my book and taking the ideas from it and saying, "I am now a changed person because of that. I am now a better person, or better in my family." I mean, it's been one of the cool things about writing this book is, if you guys read the book, you'll see every single chapter. There's 17 different chapters. Each one's on a different political or cultural topic, like climate change or COVID or freedom of speech, Second Amendment. And in each of those chapters, there's questions that I tell people they can use to ask. You can use the questions and persuasion tactics within the book to change people's minds. And so it's been so cool to have people come to me and message me or talk to me in person and say, "Hey, I actually used the questions and things in your book and it worked." Right? You weren't just blowing smoke out of your butt, Will. Like these things actually worked. So it's been incredible to see that, really.
That's a great story. Now we have a president who doesn't know who the president is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't think he knows what he ate for breakfast either. So there's a lot of problems.
So Will, I consider you, not only a commentator, but you're really a journalist. You're out there and you're reporting on what you see. Do you have any relationships with other mainstream journalists or others who have gotten to know you? Like, have they commented on your work? Have any opportunities to talk to them?
Yeah, so I will say one thing about reading Andrew Breitbart's book, which has been really cool, rereading it. And in chapter 7, he talks about, when he first started out doing the things that he was doing, he was more worried about being invited to parties with the New York Times and the Washington Post and those types of elitist people. That's what he was really worried about. But after he went on Bill Maher and made a fool of Bill Maher on his show, he realized that it was more important for him to stand up for the things that he believed in and be truthful than to want to go to these types of parties and be within these elite classes. And so that is something that I've really taken to heart, that there are these people in the legacy media, as we are now calling it, not even the mainstream media, the legacy media, and these types of people that, You know, in some ways, I have no desire to be, you know, in these people's cohorts, or to be involved with a lot of these people, because so many of these people just want to destroy me. I mean, look at what they've been doing this since the 80s. Look at what they did with Clarence Thomas. Look at what they did with Bill Clinton, how they defended that guy to the grave. I mean, with how they treated George Bush, with how they treated Obama, with how they treated President Trump. You know, the level that these mainstream media networks actually go to not tell the truth. And so my latest interaction with these people was actually with the New York Times. And so the New York Times actually did a piece on myself and PragerU. It was on the cover of the New York Times. This was about 2 years ago. And I told them the exact same story that I told you guys at the beginning of this, about where I came from and how I got to what I did, and with a little bit more detail, granted. But they didn't take the story the same way that you guys did, where you said it was a incredible story. They did not think the same thing. What they thought that they got out of it was that Will Witt was a lonely and troubled guy in college, and he saw these bright graphics from PragerU videos, and he was radicalized. This is what they got out of it, right? That it wasn't some empowering experience for me. It was a radicalization. But the thing that they don't understand, or maybe they do understand and just didn't want to talk about it, was that the conservative values, the values that I was listening to on PragerU and through all the people I listened to, they didn't radicalize me. They set me free. They changed my life. They turned me into a better person, a person who felt like I had a new outlook on life, that I could actually be someone to be a change maker in this world, you know. But they don't want you to be that. These mainstream media outlets, the legacy media, they don't want you to be a change maker. They don't want you to be someone to go out and stand up for yourself. They want you to be one of the herd. And so when it comes to these people in the mainstream media, I truly do not have too much contact with them, I will say. I have a lot of contact with many people who are more friendly to me, for sure. But and I hope this doesn't, I hope that people don't take this as like you shouldn't interact with people on the other side. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that there are people who want to destroy us and destroy our way of life. And you do not give these people the credence of saying, I will respect your opinions on these sorts of things, that when you want to destroy me. If these people could get a morsel of something that would take me down, they would run with it immediately, right? They have no conscience to say, well, maybe we should think about this. Or if they found something on Dennis Prager, when Dennis Prager had COVID, I mean, these people in the mainstream media and these leftist journalists would rather have had Dennis Prager die than recover while taking hydroxychloroquine. That is the level of these people, right? So I have no desire to be in cahoots with any of these legacy media fake news journalists.
Good choice.
Good. Well, after 30 minutes with you, I don't think you're radicalized. I think you're awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that a lot.
A few years ago, I heard one of the most riveting interviews on radio that I've ever heard. I was captivated for a couple of reasons, because Sean Hannity was interviewing someone who was painted as a horrible person, a traitor, a dangerous person that had to be, you know, locked up and thrown away the key. And it was the most fascinating interview I can recall hearing in years. And it was Julian Assange. And I bring that up because if I'm not mistaken, his picture is behind you.
He is.
Okay, so tell us your take. Why is he up there on your wall, Will?
Well, I do have to level with you. This is not my office.
Okay.
So these aren't my photos. So my room, don't worry, is littered with photos of Dennis Prager, but unfortunately this one is not my office. But what I can say is that, like I was talking about before, you have people who are journalists, people who expose the truth, people who are looking to take big establishments down because these big establishments lie all of the time, right? That's what it felt like with Julian Assange, right? And people do not understand in the left-wing media that this person is fighting against everything that they are pushing for, right? They want to label this person as some radical, some extremist, some person who just wants to watch the world burn. But no, all this person wants to do is expose the truth. You go back to the 90s, right? And you look at when the internet was first really coming around. Go look at Drudge Report, right? When Drudge Report started, I don't read too much Drudge Report anymore, but back in the day, the Drudge Report started as a a counter to the mainstream media. It was totally grassroots. It was one guy compiling stories and putting them on the internet, and they would go viral. It was the things that the mainstream media was not telling you, right? And they wanted to label him, Matt Drudge, as a horrible, terrible guy and someone who is a conspiracy theorist and just stirring the pot and not even telling what the truth actually is. But these people, like Assange and like Drudge and other people like Breitbart who have done these kinds of things and started new media networks, they are the ones who get lambasted by the media for them trying to put the truth out there. And so I am a big fan of unpopular ideas. Excuse me. I think unpopular ideas are the best ideas in the world. They usually are, at least, because unpopular ideas are what made the West. Okay, think about the founding fathers. The founding fathers was a handful of guys who had this radical idea to get away from the British Empire. That was an incredibly unpopular idea at the time to do, but they did it. And because they felt strongly enough and actually followed through on this unpopular idea, they were able to do something great. So just because we have unpopular ideas and the people in the media or at your university or at your work or even in your family will label you as this horrible person and try and make you as a pariah, it does not mean that you have to stand there and just take it from them. You have to be that brave person to push those unpopular ideas out, even if it means sacrificing some of the relationships that you have. And that's really hard. I know that's really hard for people, but there is nothing more important than pursuing the truth.
That is a great point. And what is perceived as an unpopular idea today could wind up being a popular idea later on, which brings me to my next question. So in 2020, you couldn't go on almost any street corner or any city without seeing a major rally for President Trump, thousands of people, flags. And then we get the election and we see Joe Biden hiding in his basement for 9 months, getting 81 million votes. So everybody's saying now, oh yeah, the Republicans are going to destroy the Democrats in 2022, take back the House, take back the Senate. My big fear, and this is a question we also had from the audience, is if we don't change the way we do elections back to the old days where you're going into a booth rather than unlimited mail-in voting, no signature verification, ballot harvesting, we could be in for another big surprise. So what are your thoughts on our election process?
Election integrity is the issue that no one is talking about. Most Republicans in Congress are not talking about election integrity, and that's really sad. I've heard Matt Gaetz talk about it. I've heard Paul Gosar talk about it. I've heard some of the other guys talk about it, but you don't hear Mitch McConnell talking about it. You don't hear most of these guys coming on and talking about election integrity. So what happens if you have a voting block? Let's say you have all the people in America, right? And you have them, and they might be passionate about conservatism. Maybe they're passionate about what's happening in this country and they want to do something to stop it, but they feel disenfranchised because they feel apathetic and they feel like their vote doesn't matter, right? So even if you can rile people up to be Republicans, to be conservatives, but they feel like their voice doesn't matter because the elections don't work or because they're fraudulent, how are you supposed to change the country that way? How are you supposed to even get people to the polls? I am in agreement that I think that there is going to be a red wave in America. We see the poll numbers of this administration. I mean, 16% of people are only saying that Joe Biden is doing an acceptable job. Those are some of the lowest poll numbers we've ever seen from a president. It is absolutely terrible. I think that at least 2/3 of the country is now actually MAGA, that actually want to push this new Make America Great Again and America First agenda. I think we have a large block. But if you do not fix election integrity, nothing will change. If you don't have poll watchers, I recommend, what I'm telling people to do is to get involved in your precincts, okay? Be the people who are actually watching these things take place. Don't just be someone who's sitting on the sidelines. Be someone who gets in there and says, I am going to watch these election facilities and try and work to get only in-person ballots and not do so much of this mail-in ballots. But as you guys know, in California, now we have mail-in ballots forever, essentially. So it's hard to say what will happen in California. I think that California in some ways is a lost cause, which is very sad to say. You know, I hate to be pessimistic there to say it, but things have gotten really bad. You know, I think about California as I think about Germany, and I think about East versus West Berlin. And at the point in East Berlin, when they were watching the wall go up, there wasn't much that they could do. You know, the only thing that they could do at that point was move to West Berlin before the wall went up, and there was no way for them to get out of the communist hellhole that they were being involved in, right? And in some ways, I feel like that is similar to California, where we are watching the Berlin Wall go up in our state, and instead of realizing what's happening, we are staying in East Berlin, and it might be too late.
Oof. We could use some of that humor and wit you talked about after that exchange.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I believe life is barely worth living without a sense of humor. You have to have it. But you're right; these are really serious times. And one of the things I love about you and PragerU and our JRA community is we are passionate for America, conservatism, Israel, and given how many interactions you've had with those on the left, or even those who. I love how liberal people say they're middle of the road. No, I'm moderate. But what do you wish they understood or knew about us conservatives that they can't seem to get?
That's a great question. I think that people need to understand that we want what's best for the individual, okay? When people talk about leftism, when someone says, oh, I'm a leftist or I'm a Democrat or whatever, you'll hear them list off 1,000 different things, right? I need free healthcare. We need to dismantle the police. What about the climate? What about all these different things? Fine, that's your platform as a Democrat, as you Marxist leftist, fine. That's your platform. For a conservative, you ask me what I want to be able to live my life, okay? I want individual freedoms. I want someone, when I walk into the grocery store, to not tell me that I have to put a piece of cloth over my face. I want to be able to not have extreme business regulations in California that inhibit me from being able to start a small business. I want to be able to go somewhere and feel like I can live out the American dream without being crushed by corporate or government bureaucratic overlords, right? This is what people want. And most people do want that. They just don't realize that they actually do. And I was in an Uber. This was a couple of years ago, but I'll tell the story. I was in an Uber and I was on my way to a speech, and I was in a suit. I look nice, and my Uber driver, she's this Hispanic woman, and she says, "Oh, you look nice. Like, what do you do for a living? Where are you going?" I was like, "Oh, I work in politics." And she's like, "Oh my God, that's so good that we have young people getting Trump out of office here. Thank you." And I just kind of laughed. I was like, "Yeah, sure." But we get to talking, and I was going on this speech with her. And it turns out that she was against affirmative action. She was against the welfare state. She wanted fathers in the homes. And when she wasn't an Uber driver, she was actually a school teacher for elementary school and didn't want transgender bathrooms to be put into her elementary school. And it was like every single thing that this lady talked about was a conservative Republican value, but she thought that she was a Democrat, right? And so I think that most people actually understand the things that they want, but they don't know how to get it. They think that the left and the Democrats are the ones who are going to get them this. I mean, I can guarantee you go look at, if you were to poll people in Los Angeles or in San Francisco and see who they're voting for in this next election, you will still get a huge margin for Democrats, for whoever is the next presidential nominee on the Democratic side, because they just don't know. Even though Joe Biden has done all these horrible things and it's been terrible for so many Americans and things have gotten more expensive and crime has risen, they will still vote left because they don't know. So as conservatives and people who believe in freedom and Republicans, it is up to us to get involved in our precincts and to talk to people that we disagree with so that we can actually change their minds so that they know what is going on. Know that this is about the individual versus the collective. I mean, this goes back to Alinsky's Rules for Radicals and the Frankfurt School and Edward Murrow and all these guys talking about that the number one thing that you have to do to institute leftism into your society is get it into a collective. Okay, this is really the battle of the collective versus the individual.
Well done.
Excellent. So we have a question from the audience. Our friend Lee A is asking, what can the on-campus moderate or conservative students who are not aggressive by nature currently on campus do in order to stop the crazy rhetoric by the left professors without either being thrown out of class or school or have a negative impact on their grades or being called out? What can they do? What can they do?
I'll answer that in two parts. One, there is no guarantee that you speaking out for truth is not going to impact your grade. I am sorry. There is no other way around it, okay? People want to think that there's just a way that you can be truthful and not have the consequences of people who are totally diametrically opposed to you, there is a chance that if you speak about the things that you say in a college class, people will give you a worse grade because they do not like your opinion, okay? But what you have to do, you have to take that to the dean, you have to take that to the dean of whatever department you're in as well, and also publicize it, okay? And when it comes to publicizing, one thing that we all have the power to do now, we all have cell phones, okay? What the left does in the mainstream media, what do they do to conservatives? They try and hold us accountable, okay? They try and make us into hypocrites. If a conservative comes out and says, you know, I believe in family values, and then they get caught cheating on their wife, they will hold them accountable and say, see, this is what this person is doing. So what do we have to do as conservatives to the left? We have to hold them accountable to the things that they say. This means exposing them. If you are in a class and you see your leftist teacher talking about all this nonsense, or leftist students doing nonsense at some club or on your campus, you film it, you expose them, and you make them accountable for the things that they say, because they feel like they can get away with all these things. They feel like they can say nonsense and lie and cheat and be deceitful and get away with it. But they can't get away with it if you film it and you expose it to people. Why do you think James O'Keefe with Project Veritas is so successful? He's successful because he exposes the things that all these people are doing. I'm not saying that you have to be some undercover journalist, but what I'm saying, it's as easy as when your leftist professor says all white people are terrible, and you were recording that and you post that on your Facebook or your Instagram or your Twitter. That is how you expose them. We all have the power to do these kinds of things. You can't let them get away with the things that they are trying to hide, okay? Because that is how they win. That is how they win.
Excellent. And yes, the left is, as devious as they are, they're pretty brilliant in their strategies, and we have to do it from the good side. We have a lot of audience members called Anonymous. One of them wrote a great question. It's a bit of a conundrum. So I think all of us have had the situation you referenced, Will, where you walk in and a young employee says, you know, either nicely or not so nicely, please put your mask on. And if you're a decent person, it doesn't really go over well to yell at the young employee who's just doing what they're told and doing the job. But what do you do about restaurants or businesses that are literally asking for your papers? And the business owner, of course, is in a conundrum, because on one hand, they don't fear the cops, they don't fear the sheriff, they fear the health department, and they want to stay in business. On the other hand, you know, they want customers, and they probably are not comfortable saying, where are your papers? So how do you handle this situation? What are your thoughts on it?
That is a great question. That is a very good question, and one that I actually just discovered a new answer to. What I want everyone to do is to look at 21 US Code 360 BBB-3, okay? This deals with medical devices in an emergency that people are essentially mandating for you to wear. These things are not laws. If you go to section 3 and then go to section E of this code, okay, I know there's a lot of different letters and numbers there. What that last part says in section E is that you have the right to refuse, okay? People don't know that. If you go into a business and they tell you to wear your mask, you can ask them and say, do you know the law? This is the law. You have the right to refuse these types of things, okay? And I know a lot of us, it's scary for us to go in there and have employees come and say, well, you have to do this, you have to do this. Just say no. And if they say, you know, well, we're not going to check you out or we're not going to serve you, fine, that's their prerogative. You leave and you go find somewhere else, okay? But I am telling you that these things are not laws. These are mandates, okay? It is not a law. It's no constitutional amendment that they are allowed to do this. The reason why this code works, and I'm telling you, 21 US Code 360 BBB-3 works, is because these are not FDA approved. Masks are not FDA approved. The vaccines are in many ways not FDA approved. I mean, they're still EUAs in lots of ways, okay? So you can use them as this for this code. So just ask them if they know the law. And if they get violent with you or anything like that, you tell them to call the police. I mean, tell them to call the police. I have been very successful with not having to wear a mask anywhere because I just tell people these things. And again, you can be very level-headed with people. You should not be getting mad at these low-level employees. Of course not. You know, the guy at Ralph's is just trying to do his job. You don't want to yell at this person or be rude to this person. Of course not. You know, and if they ask you to leave because they don't like it, that's fine. Then you leave. But You do not have to comply with these mandates. People think that you just have to go and comply automatically. You really do not.
I like the people who wear masks in the car when they're all by themselves. That's the funny thing.
Those are my favorite people.
Yeah, those are the, well, at least they're safe.
Uh-huh.
You know, you mentioned James O'Keefe and Project Veritas, and I think we should talk about this, but you know, he was raided. You know, he's a guy who's been speaking out, you know, coming up with kind of hidden cameras and hidden microphones to expose people. And now he's been raided. And that's pretty scary that the government goes after somebody who's a journalist. Do you ever have those fears that will happen to you? And what do you think about what's happening with Project Veritas and James O'Keefe?
Excuse me. Yeah, I have those fears all the time. I'm worried about something that might happen, you know, but you can't let those types of fears dissuade you from doing what you do. Just like I feel like very, very much so that I know the truth of things that is going on. I feel like a lot of my peers here at PragerU also know the truth that is going on. Many of the people who work at PragerU know that, you know, because of having this on their resume, it will be very difficult for them to ever get another job somewhere else, right? To have PragerU, let's say graphic designer or social media coordinator, and it says PragerU, it's going to be very hard for them to get a job, especially in this city, in Los Angeles, ever again, right? Because people see what that is and they hate you for it. But just because of that doesn't mean I'm going to stop speaking the truth. And so even though I am worried that people want to destroy me and hunt me down and these types of things and ruin my reputation, it doesn't dissuade me. It actually empowers me. It's like when people call me a racist or a sexist or anti-vax or conspiracy theorist, any of these types of things that people say, it's like I actually revel in that, because they call me that because they don't have another argument. If they had another argument, they wouldn't have to call me racist, right? They could say, well, you said this, right? But they don't have that. They never have that. All they can do is call me racist. So in some ways, I'm almost proud of the fact that they call me that, because it means they don't have a real argument against me or any of the things that PragerU has said or anything like that. So it is worrying, but I am proud to be someone who I believe knows the truth of what is going on, and I am going to continue fighting for it. And I believe James O'Keefe and his team is going to continue doing that. You know, they haven't lost a lawsuit yet. They are on fire. James O'Keefe is a rabble rouser and a great guy and is doing the right thing. And I hope that this doesn't deter him from continuing to expose these people, which it doesn't seem like it has, because this new recording of this Arizona governor candidate, Alex Stovall, that was just yesterday, and it's already going out tons of different places. So James O'Keefe isn't slowing down, and neither will I or anyone else here at PragerU.
Yes, your the heroic efforts to keep fighting no matter what, especially in the face of such daunting odds. So, Will, I've heard you have an incredible crystal ball, so don't disappoint me here. Let's say it's 3 years from now, we're having this conversation. What has happened? You're looking back over the past 3 years. What has happened in this country for you to feel really happy about the progress we're making?
So you're saying in 3 years from now, what I'm going to see is
right. 3 years from now, you're going to look back and say, wow, look at all the great things that have happened these past 3 years in our country. What are some?
Got it. Wow, that is quite the question. Let me just summon my crystal ball real quick to see what we're thinking.
Take your time.
Yeah. What I think is going to happen, and this isn't just in America, but I think throughout the world. One thing to note that America is always about 3 to 6 months behind Europe on a lot of these things, especially when it's come to COVID stuff, is that Europe will push things through, and then in 3 to 6 months, it'll happen similarly in America. Right now in Austria is mandating vaccines for everybody by February 1st. Okay, if you do not get vaccinated in Austria, you could potentially face jail time and major fines. All right, Germany is locking down the unvaccinated. These things that are happening are quite crazy. And so what I see happening in the future that I think is actually going to be quite good for this country is that when people see evil, they fight against evil. Okay, it's like that old saying about, weak men create hard times create strong men create good times. Like that's basically what it's like, is that even when things get really bad, that is the chance for people to be heroes. And that is something that I love. The hero's journey is that there is no way for you to be a hero if the world is fine. I wouldn't have, if America was fine right now, I wouldn't have a job. Dennis Prager's show wouldn't be so popular. Trump wouldn't have been elected in 2016, right? Like those things wouldn't have happened if things weren't so bad. But because things are bad, that means that we get to embrace these struggles and become great men. And that is something that I can really look forward to. That it's like Bruce Lee said, you know, do not pray for an easy life, pray for the strength to handle a difficult one. That is what I can look forward to in 3 years. You know, I know I'm kind of giving like a above the shoulders type of answer, not like exact policy or anything, but that it's hard to tell what's going to happen. I mean, if anyone, 3 years ago, I would have never guessed that the COVID pandemic was going to happen. I wouldn't have known anything, you know? So to even try and predict that would have been nearly impossible. But what I can say is that hard American people are waking up to the fact of what is happening, and they are now warriors. We have more warriors in America, people who understand the truth, than I think ever before. And because of that, we can do a lot of good, but it's about people embracing their inner warrior and saying, I'm going to be someone who stands for truth, and we will see what happens. I do not know. I wish I knew more, but all I know is that I'm going to keep fighting, and I hope everyone else will too.
Oh, that's great, Will. And we know you work with PragerU, you work for PragerU. You know, take a moment to tell our audience what it's like to work at PragerU and the great organization that Marissa and Alan and Dennis have put together. Tell our audience.
And working at PragerU has been a dream. I love working at PragerU. The people who are here are fantastic. The values that PragerU espouses is incredible. You know, all of Dennis Prager's wisdom distilled into shorter sound bites and things like that. PragerU is great, you know, because there's a lot of just political talk always happening all the time, but PragerU really focuses on the values. And that's something that I think is why we've been able to last and also grow so exponentially versus a lot of other outlets. So it's been incredible to see. And, you know, Dennis is obviously, his wisdom is amazing, and Alan being such a strong leader, and Marissa being such a strong leader, the CEO, and really being someone who they have much better crystal balls than I do. I will tell you that right now. I've made mistakes that they would have warned me about, right? And they say, you know, here's what PragerU is going to do, here's how we're going to go forward, and they just keep making right decisions, and PragerU just continues to grow. So I am incredibly happy with the organization, and I only see it going up from here, you know?
Well, with the billions of views you've had, I mean, it's just remarkable. You know, you're concerned, but you're optimistic as an individual, which is very, you know, and you're up for the fight, and we're very grateful for that. The pattern I've seen, Will, is that Democrats, or the Democratic Party, is almost always wrong. They double down, they never apologize, and they get away with it. Is there a certain point or an issue at which you think they're not going to get away with it anymore? Are we there yet, or do they have more runway to keep getting away with it? Because they seem to always do.
You know, I think that they are going to continue to get away with it. One of the major things that I talk about on my show almost every day, because it comes up with most of the stories that we talk about, is that there is no accountability in America anymore. No one is held accountable, whether that's the individual who works at some fast food chain or the biggest member of Congress. No one is held accountable for their actions anywhere in America, okay? Everyone gets a trophy. No one has to admit when they're wrong. Everything is just totally fine. So, and that's not even just a Democrat thing. I mean, that is on both sides of the aisle, that people don't have to be held accountable for their actions. People have gotten it so easy that they no longer feel responsible or entitled to take responsibility. And so because of all that, I think that the Democrats will continue to get away with things. But you mentioned something that was important there with how the left acts, how the Democrats act, and that is that they don't apologize for things, okay? And I think that there comes a point where Republicans, in a way, have to act in certain ways that are similar, that are akin to what the left does, okay? You do not lie, you do not give violence, you do not cheat, you are not deceitful, you do not do any of these things. But the left obviously has a playbook that works, and a lot of the way that they influence culture works, and a lot of their not backing down, it works, okay? Conservatives for too long have backed down and said, all right, we're gonna give you an inch, right? We're going to give you an inch here and here and here and here. And after you've given them so many inches, eventually they've gotten a mile. And this is why we're in the position that we're in, right? It's like members of Congress coming out and apologizing for things that they shouldn't be apologizing for in the first place. It's like, no, you shouldn't apologize. You said what you said, you believed it. Be strong about it instead of apologizing. I mean, the members of Congress, so many of them we have right now on the right, they care more about what the New York Times or the Washington Post says about them more than they care about what their constituents actually think or what they're actually doing for them, right? And so I think that it's time for conservatives to play a little bit of smash mouth and get out there and take this country back. You know, we have to be brave. We have to have backbones. We got to be strong. We can't just expect that again, tax policy or white papers with facts on it is going to totally influence people to vote Republican or to be conservative. It takes more than that. It takes being strong.
We agree, and ultimately being true to your convictions and being strong, we will prevail. Will Witt, thank you for joining us today and sharing your views with our audience. Will's new book, How to Win Friends and Influence Enemies, Taking on Liberal Arguments with Logic and Humor. We've posted a link here in our chat. And so, Will, we appreciate you being on here, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, God bless you guys. This was a lot of fun. Thank you.
It sure was. It sure was. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here with us today. We now call these live shows that we're doing JRA Loudspeaker. We're going to continue them. We're having our planning meetings and designing what we're going to do for 2022, which candidates JRA Nation will stand for, which big events we're going to have. We invite you to reach out and get involved and make a difference and let us know what you're interested in participating in. We need your participation and we need your support. So everybody, thank you for being here. Until we meet again, Shabbat Shalom and have a great weekend.
Shabbat Shalom.